how can we best get control of our minds? And, I love this question because we are never taught to do this. We have never in all of our lives, in all of our education through the mainstream system, even realized that we can control our minds. It's pretty scary when you think about it. I remember when I was first learning about Buddhism and the concept of mindfulness, I was in complete awe that I could actually observe my mind. And it blew me away. It blew me away because when we first start to connect in with observing our thoughts, it's chaotic, right? I'm sure you've all had that experience, like, whoa, what's my mind doing now? Right? Like it's all over the place. And as they teach in mindfulness, mindfulness isn't about stopping the mind. That's like level 10 mindfulness, really being able to come to the absolute presence of the now moment, which then opens up to the greater reality, really. Like everything's contained within the now, but that's a different conversation. That's a different conversation to now get that to this question. And so the first step is recognizing what your mind's doing. And as we allow ourselves to pause and breathe a nice, beautiful, deep, steady breath, what I love the most about the breath and the deep, long, steady breaths is that it stimulates our vagus nerve and it reconnects our higher order thinking. And so when we're in this survival mode, if we're stressed, it's not going to be possible to access solutions, firstly, easily. And it's also not going to be easy to step outside of what's happening, because when we're in danger, we're right in it. We're looking for trouble. We're looking for, where the next wild animal's coming from, which is why we have that as a natural function to keep us safe. But what's happened in this modern world is we are constantly taken out of that by our overbusyness, by all of the things that we believe that need to be done in a day, all of the stories that continue to perpetuate drama and problems keep us in our survival brain, which negates the capacity to find solutions. It pretty much negates the capacity to evolve because we're not able to witness the self for introspection. So our third eye literally is our capacity to self-reflect. Insight means sight within. So our third eye is this beautiful energetic space that opens up ourselves up for self-reflection. And self-reflection can only happen first when we're calm. And so I really recommend coming to that calm place first. And what you'll find is that is already becoming stiller. That's probably the best suggestion, is to come back to the breath. And as you breathe, really feeling the air expanding the lungs, drawing it down towards the belly, and that full lung expansion with the diaphragm, that's the muscle group at the bottom. As the diaphragm pulls downwards, it stimulates the vagus nerve, which puts us into this calmness. And in the calmness, literally negates that back in the mind. Another really beautiful practice, and I'm going to share it with you here, it's called a 3-minute breathing space. And it is simple and it's easy to do and it's fast, and it will literally help you to move out of here calm the mind and bring you into that space of being able to connect with our inside, with our solutions, and take us away from the crazy chat, the how we're in danger constantly and consistently. And so how this practice goes is we do a breath. We move through each of the fingers on one hand and then through the fingers of the other hand and then back in the other direction. And you will literally, if you're stressed, it's perfect to do in the moment when you're feeling stressed, because you'll feel your stress levels go down. If you're in your mind's having its way with you, do that as well. And you will feel it shift, because not only are we connecting with the deep, steady breaths, we are also taking our focus off the danger and off our minds and bringing it into the body by doing this. These are actually energy mudras, and they help to reharmonize each of the elements as well within our body. But even without that information, it works. And so, feel free to share it with anybody and everybody, because it will change. It does change people's lives. And so if you take a moment now and you join your thumb and forefinger together, and as you take a breath in and pause and releasing the breath out, and then moving on to the next finger, the middle finger, and taking another round of breath. And then moving the thumb onto the ring finger of that first hand, and again breathing in and breathing out. Slowing down the breath as much as is comfortable as you connect the thumb and the little finger and take another round of breath. And then as we move on to the second hand, again breathing in and breathing out. And then taking the thumb onto the ring finger of the second hand, and again breathing in, breathing out. And as you move to the middle finger, doing that again, and this time seeing if you can draw it down towards your belly. Really allowing those lungs to reach their fullness as you move on to the index finger of the first hand. And another big, deep, steady breath. And now moving back in the opposite direction in your own time. Really drinking those beautiful, deep, steady breaths. Really feeling that expansiveness as you breathe in. Back to the first hand. There's no rush. And then as you breathe out, really feel that softening that happens with that. And so just keep moving back through all those fingers. And then when you get back to the beginning, again, taking another round of breath and then pausing for a moment and checking in with how you're feeling. And so this practice, it works in the moment, and you'll also notice that the mind has slowed down as well, because the mind reflects the nervous system. When we're calm, so is the mind. And when we're calm, our mind looks for solutions rather than keeping perpetuating the danger, the survival mind. The beautiful thing about this practice is it not only stops stress in the moment, it also creates what's called nervous system tone, which means we become less likely to get triggered over time. And so I often recommend people, particularly people who are stuck in that fight or flight response, I'm sure you've all heard of that, is to do this practice a couple of times a day, morning and night, because what it will do is it will start to entrain your nervous system to operate from that space of balance, from that space of peace and calm. And that can take time. It doesn't mean that stress doesn't happen. It means that it will happen much less frequently, but it also will help you to come back into alignment much more quickly because you start to notice the stark difference. Like when you've taken the time to entrain your nervous system to be calm as its natural state, that when you do get into a stress state, it's not when we're in a stress state and we're always in a stress state, we don't even know. We're just like doing the things, sometimes thinking it's exciting, but then it just gets all too exciting and then it starts making us feel sick. And then we look for danger, and these perpetuating cycles become the norm until we can't cope with it anymore, because the system also needs to relax and rest. And so this beautiful breathing practice is a really quick and simple way to help to start to entrain the system to be calm. And then when we do have a stress response for something, we can come from an empowered space because we're recognizing it's happening, we're catching it in the moment, and we can introspect through our third eye and ask what's happening. Feel into what's happening right now that created that. Okay, got it. Thank you. Now, what can I do about it to avoid this continuing to happen? And that's why it's there. Like, we have these emotions not to create havoc. They only create havoc if we continue to perpetuate them with no end in sight. But our emotions are actually there for our benefit. They're there to show us what's not in alignment with our peace and harmony so that we can take action to create change. And so just breathing into that. Our emotions are signals to show us what's in alignment and what's not with us. It doesn't make anybody else or anything else good or bad. We can perceive it as that, but it's not necessarily true because everybody thinks and feels differently. But what we do have is self-sovereignty. We have the freedom of choice to feel exactly how we feel. And when we allow ourselves to start to recognize that all emotions are good emotions because they're signaling things to us to help us long term. How can we create change? What's coming up for me that I've pushed down for decades sometimes? And this is the inner work. And again, I'm sure that if you are here in this collective, you're doing the inner work as best you can. And it's like, keep going. Keep going. There's a lot of layers by this evolution of humanity because we have been here so many times. Our ancestors have been here so many times, and there's a lot of collective programming that's there for us to discover more about our own truth. Again, it's not bad. Nothing's good or bad. This is a beautiful conversation. And, I love that it's come forward that nothing is actually good or bad. And that's big. That's big to breathe into that and to recognize that everything is perception. And when we can allow ourselves to start to realize that at our deepest levels, it helps us to stop being reactive as much it stops us having our mind run away from us in reactivity, because it's the reactivity that creates the stress brain engagement, the survival brain, which continues to perpetuate problems because it thinks it's keeping us alive by making us aware of the wild animals that are outside. And our communities aren't wild animals, most of our communities. If you watch the news, yes, the news will make sure, go out of its way to find some wild animal somewhere in the form of a human doing something to hurt others. And even if they can't find something, they make something up. And so just breathing into that. And so, I love that. And it feels like even a capstone of the teaching so far is ultimately there is no good or bad. There is only a perception of what's happening in any moment that might actually be doing us a favor long term. Even if it doesn't feel good for us in the moment, it could be the exact thing that was needed to help move us back onto our highest timeline, to help us change trajectory. The bigger the shock or the bigger the issue, the bigger the magnitude of change that's available out the other side. And so breathing into that. And this is what's there from us from an expanded perspective. As we evolve into being higher vibrational humans, these are the aspects that come to light because they're necessary to evolve. They're necessary for us to create a higher dimensional reality. We can't carry the old stories because, again, they're just a perception. They're a hijacked perception that has been blanketedly programmed with the lack and the fear and the problems. And just in case you missed it, we'll play it again later tonight. And this is the reality. Since 2020, a lot of people have got a bit wise now to the media, gratefully. And, that's what the guide said to me at the time. Like, I was really like, what's this about? Because I could see the devastation, the split that it was causing, with the jabs, the split that it was causing in families and, society and all the things, people being made to do what they didn't want to and all of this. And I've just gone to the guides, what is this about? And the guides were literally, it had to be that severe to wake people up. Otherwise, we're all just comfortable being a little bit shitty about everything all the time. Does that create change? It just keeps us trapped in the repeating cycles of just staying a little bit shitty. And so when stuff happens that feels like, we've been run over by a truck sometimes, what's happened out the other side of that? I'm not taking away from the pain and the suffering that happens in the moment, but to expand out, to witness the greater reality of what that was actually about, what was the benefit? What benefits came out of it out the other side? Empowerment, resilience, changing trajectory, being in a completely different profession, being in a completely different country, being in a completely different relationship. All of these things are here to serve us on some level. Just breathing into that. And so the easiest way to tame the mind is by starting to relax the nervous system. Relax that nervous system and reflect. Access your higher order thinking, access your inner wisdom. inner wisdom that,